Hey, I'm just going to jump into it and do a new video. Thanks to all the existing subscribers to this channel. I've been doing some shorts lately. You might have picked up on that. It might not be super appropriate for you if you've been into Bitcoin for a longer time. I'm hoping they can be useful anyway if you're dealing with naysayers and haters and no coiners, or just shitcoiners, or anyone that's trying to make stupid arguments and you want some really, really short form content that tries to be as accurate as possible, or as possible as you can be when you're making 60-second videos on relatively complicated and esoteric Bitcoin topics. So anyway, we got all that there. I wanted to talk today about stuff that's really just got nothing to do with Bitcoin, but here we are. I watched that movie, The Sound of Freedom, and I'm trying to think, what's the angle? Where's everyone at with it? And of course, my first reaction to it is, fuck, holy fuck, I'm so naive. These people, there really are people doing this sorts of stuff, and there's a massive industry for it. And oh my goodness, I have children, and what if I was in that situation? And, they were being exploited like that and abused. And it's a very emotional, visceral reaction, right? And it's appropriate, but what I'm going to warn about is how those can be leveraged and used against us. And then you combine that with the fact that there's either intentional or you know you have two perspectives on the suppression, right? Because part of what's made this such a big splash is because it's been suppressed, apparently. So despite the fact that you can still go and see this movie relatively easily, there seems to be a general "don't watch this" snobbery in the media, saying, "Oh, this is bad somehow." We don't really have a good reason why we think it's bad, but it's bad. Don't watch it. From organizations that are all pretty tainted with history of child sex crimes and things like that. So the mind naturally goes to like level 2 psyop, where you go, these people don't want us to watch this because they're all pedos, and I'm not being a sucker to, level 1 is just to believe them and go, this is stupid. And some stupid article will say, QAnon supporters believe this, right-wing people believe this film is true, and then, you just dismiss it because you're that stupid. Then the next level is, I'm going to watch it and believe it and sort of get emotional in a way that I'm supposed to not get. That's sort of level 2 of it. And I'm going, am I still a sucker, though, for falling for that? Because that's what happened with COVID. I thought, I'm outsmarting everyone by prepping and treating this thing as the apocalypse because they're telling me it's not a pandemic and it's not that dangerous. And I'm seeing little secret videos come out of China that I'm not allowed to watch, that are censored on Twitter, of people falling over and dying from this deadly plague that's going around. I thought I was clever, right? Turns out they weaponized that emotion against all of us, and it really can be this simple. So I'm saying level 3 is realizing, how are they going to weaponize this feeling against us? In the way that they always do is the answer, which is the old formula: problem, reaction, solution. And what's the problem? There's a disease going around. Reaction: we're terrified of this disease. Solution: none of you are allowed out of your house anymore, or to keep your businesses open, or to do anything that we don't permit. All of that shit. Problem. What's the problem? The climate is heating up and it's going to kill everyone and boil the oceans and all that. Reaction: oh my goodness, so scary. What can we do? Solution: none of you are allowed out of your house anymore. Take the climate vaccine. So what's this one going to be? I mean, it doesn't even matter. Like, I do believe the guy that the movie is based on is probably a hero and probably talking pretty factually about what he's done, and he might just be entirely sincere in what's going on here. And I actually think he is. I think the guy is a hero who saved children from being trafficked, and and he can be entirely independent of any sort of motive or just political opportunism that will weaponize the natural reaction to this stuff going mainstream, these realizations about how disgusting large percentages of our species are and how willing they are to abuse and hurt people, uh, there can just be a natural reaction to that, which gets just utterly used against us. I've said that several times now, but I can start to go into some examples of it. The solution to the problem of child sexual exploitation and trafficking would be unthinkable, right? If that thing made its way into the political echelons and they started going, all right, there is a pandemic of child sex trafficking and it's terrible. People, whatever solution they propose to that, first off, it's going to hurt because any government proposed solution to anything is always a bad idea, just full stop. But we go further than that and go, what do you even think is remotely plausible as a mechanism for preventing this stuff? It would just be extreme crackdown on freedom of movement and the ability of parents to do anything with their children. Everything's going to have to go through the authorities. So, I mean, and what are you faced with if you resist any of that? Being classically libertarian in a world where people are paranoid about child sexual exploitation sounds like a very difficult tightrope to walk. Basically, it's an impossible one because you know what people are like. They're going to call for draconian and authoritarian measures to prevent these kinds of things from happening. And if you stand up for it, you're not a grandma killer, you're a child rapist. Fuck me, that's not going to be an easy one to defend. But it gets really confused, right? Because we've got all the gender ideological bullshit. We've got people trying to reframe pedophilia as minor attracted persons and desensitize us to it. And, all these efforts to try and make it, seem somewhat more okay. So that encourages an even more visceral reaction. But I think that's a temporary phenomena. I don't think the reaction... I think we can be blinded by our own rejection of the gender ideology and the apparent placation of this evil sexual proclivity. Because you've got lesbians and gays and that stuff, and it's not fair enough. Do what you like. Like the more sort of dogmatically spiritual people are going to have just a problem with that from the start off, of even tolerance of that. There are plenty of cultures that are like, that is not acceptable, right? But when you go further down it and you start crossing the boundary into like, yeah, well, in Canada, if your kid wants to have gender reassignment surgery and you're not prepared to go along with it, you're going to be guilty of some serious shit. Like you're going to be facing fines and jail time. And, if there's a divorce and one parent is okay with it and one isn't, the one that isn't is going to get absolutely fucked, even though he's, he might be doing something as unbelievably reasonable as saying I refuse to let my preteen child have permanent bodily modification, if or even just hormone treatment or something, that insane crap, right? We're there. That's where we are in North America at the moment, depending on your state, in the United States and basically all over Canada. As far as I know, it's pretty fucked here. Whenever, that account Libs of TikTok, anytime there's some insane gender shit going on with students, with teenagers or people below teenage, it's always coming out of British Columbia, which is the province I live in. So, it's fucked up. It's really fucked up. And so, but the point is, to zoom out from that, the reaction we have to that means that when we see this shit like Sounds of Freedom, and even in this interview I just watched where Jordan Peterson interviews the two, the actor from that movie and the guy it's based on, they link it, they draw a parallel between all that stuff. They combine it all and say, this whole, the massive normalization of non-traditional sexual preference, or the abnormal sexual preference, or something like that, is part of the same agenda as that seeks to rationalize and placate human trafficking of children and the most evil treatment of them, and the trouble is, like, these are two. I'm having a hard time putting this into words. Bear with me. The reason I see a problem coming out of this is because the rejection of LGBT dogma and all that stuff, and rainbow washing everything, doesn't conflict with basic principles of freedom, right? It says, I can still call you a man if I want. You don't get to tell me that I have to call you a woman, even though I don't think you are. Like, I'm going to have free speech. I'm going to do things like that. It does start to get dicey when you come into, you're not allowed to do that shit in front of my kids, right? Like, there are the more ideologically naive libertarians that are like, that will watch two dudes fuck each other in the middle of a parade in the street with kids around and be like, yay, freedom. Like, but most people aren't that naive, right? Most people know that's stupid, but the problem is, this is the part of the libertarian ideology. Not that I'm a libertarian exactly. I just basically find it better than any other ideology. I don't really subscribe to, I wouldn't call myself a libertarian. I respect most of the principles of it and try to live according to it, but there are massive problems with libertarianism that I can't reconcile. But it's not like any other ideology is better or political description. So basically I'm the bottom right quadrant on the political alignment chart, but I still don't think you're solving any problems with that. But I don't want to discuss that stuff. I'm just saying that basically is how I've attempted to morally orient myself for the last 15 years or so. And the problem that I have with it is that, what do you do when it comes to kids? Because I want people's bad behavior and bad influence not to exist around my kids. And it's this is where you suddenly fall into the trap of these crappy, these conservative people that aren't interested in libertarian values at all. They just want everyone to do exactly what they're told, but for it to be a different doctrine to what the rabid leftists are pushing. So you've got these people like Matt Walsh, right? They're not they're not libertarians at all. They just don't want the current dogma to be what's acceptable. They want to make all that completely punishable. Like Ben Shapiro, people like that, they're not libertarians. They just brush up against the freedom community every now and again because conservatives have been on the back foot for years. But the minute these people are in power, they're going to make everything rigid and disgusting and intolerable to people that want freedom. So these are not natural. Even Trump is a great example. In fact, he's the perfect example because he describes himself as the law and order candidate, which is basically just saying we want there to be an acceptable way to behave and we want to punish people that detract from that. And that's attractive if your society is horrible and degenerate, but it's not morally defensible because people, as much as you hate the things people do with their freedom, you still want them to be free. That's the point, right? We want people to have freedom of speech, and if we don't like what they're saying, that's the test of whether we mean it or not with our principles. So, obviously we know the leftists don't have any respect for freedom at all in the first place. They just openly want to limit it. They want to go full Stalin. But the right is confused and wants to limit, wants everyone to be free. Respect freedom of speech. Yay, Elon Musk, Twitter, all this stuff. They're all happy about that because they're the ones being censored. But give them one tiny amount of power and they'll just censor everyone on the left. They want to ban all the LGBT nut jobs. The people championing that ideology. And I'm like, well, then you're just shit. You still don't have any respect for freedom. Like, it's fucked, right? Because I do still want to respect the freedom of someone that wants to go and chop their genitals off and pretend to be another gender. I do genuinely think you have to respect their freedom of choice to do that. But then what happens when you get minors, right? When you get children, what do you do about that? I start to advocate vigilantism because I don't know what else there is to do, really. Like, you can't have a morally when you set up, it's like everything else that we protest about. Like, it's not who would build the roads if it wasn't for the government. It's the roads are fucked because of the government and because they won't get out of the way. We can't sort the roads out. That's how I feel things happen when it comes to child sexual exploitation. When that stuff starts to happen and we start begging for the authorities to do stuff, you set up institutions that are basically the worst offenders of it. Like, I'm pretty sure that, where do you go? Like the clergy. Like, great example, the clergy. Like, oh my goodness, I'm having a horrific time. I need someone. Go to a place with some trustworthy moral backbone where I will be protected. Oh, the guy running the thing is a pedophile himself. Like, there's no better example than that, right? The minute you have these institutions that you're supposed to trust to protect people doing it on a moral basis, like the police, like churches, things like that, that's where you go and you find the worst depravity. So it becomes a cure worse than a disease. That's why I would advocate vigilantism. But I don't even want to do that here. Not because I think it's risky for doing it online. That's fraught with problems too. But to be honest, it's probably the better of the two options. So, I mean, I'm so naive and I'm looking at this stuff and I'm just saying, is it really that rife of a problem? And then I think, and I realize I know a few people, I know multiple people that were sexually targeted when they were children. I know people that have been victims of it, and I'm even aware of people, like that I'm 2 or 3 degrees separated from, who have had their children molested. And I'm like, well, what happened there? The dude's still around. He's still walking around. Like, this guy molested one of my children, and I didn't call the police about it, and no one believes that it really happened, and it traumatized my kid. And I'm like, what the fuck? And this kid is the guy is just still around, right? He's just, oh, whatever, people were, awkward about it for a while, and everyone just sort of forgot about it. I'm like, what the fuck? This actually totally happens, and I'm realizing, like, I don't even think about it. So this movie provoked me and made me think about it. So, I guess, yeah, to get back to the point, I'm talking about how it all ties together and what the natural result of this thing will be. If everyone reacts the way I did before I had a moment to pause for thought, like, my initial reaction is just sheer anger and the desire to go and take to the streets, load up my shotgun, etc., etc. I'm sure you can imagine what I mean, but I don't really want to say it. But I just don't see something like that working out. I don't see anything that can be done beyond parents making sure that their kids are safe to the greatest extent possible, and that's about the best we can do. Because anything that would change on a systemic level, like, oh, okay, there's millions of children that are falling victim to this, which means there must be millions, at least millions of adults worldwide that are, that are the basis for the market for this evil shit. There's money flowing into it at all levels of power too, right? Like these warped, perverted, creeps that do, stuff from the upper echelons and have all these horrible agendas and these, those kinds of people, the people you really don't want to mess with because they're evil and powerful. Like, they're doing this stuff. I will do anything I can to keep my kids out of their clutches. And beyond that, any call for systemic protection against them will be permission granted by those same people, assuming that this is going on with people in the top levels of society, right? And I don't really have a problem believing that. Like, I believed Pizzagate the minute it came out. Again, using the faulty heuristic that, oh, Reddit banned it, so it must be true. And that maybe isn't so faulty, because we found out Ghislaine Maxwell was the 6th biggest account on Reddit, right? So she had some pull there. The minute Pizzagate came out, why the fuck did Reddit ban it? I don't know. Like, I read the fucking emails from Podesta and Obama and Clinton, and it was dodgy as fuck. Like, and then you see all the art from Abramovich, and I think that was her name. And you're like, yeah, this is fucked. Like, why the hell are their kids being, like, having their organs ripped out and stuff like that? This is apparently what's going on. We heard the conspiracy theories anyway. Who would just have that on their wall in the first place? Sorry, like, something's a bit weird with that. And then what, that was years ago. That was 2016. Then Epstein happens, and it's basically corroboration of all those theories anyway, which is There's some really shady sexual shit going on in private amongst a bunch of billionaires. There's really dark stuff going on. There's perverted desires. There's secret recordings. There's blackmail going on. Like, this is unbelievably dark shit that a naive person like me is looking at and going, holy shit, I don't even know what to think about this. And then just trying to move on with my life and not think about it. And so I see all that stuff and I'm like, what sucks about it so much is that if all this was made public, like you see that it's all clandestine. And, Epstein goes to jail over it. And, then apparently Epstein's himself in the head 3 times or whatever. He's gone. Bill Gates gets asked about it. What about those dinners you had with him? And his response is, well, he's dead. So there you go. Like, what? Like, I mean, this is so fucked up. You see all this stuff. And I'm just saying, I'm trying to respond to it in a way that isn't stupid. And I'm a moist brain like everyone else, a smooth brain, and I look at it and of course I have the natural reaction I do, which is after several layers of onion anyway. Like, I'm less brainwashed than the majority of people, but I'm still prone to human reactions, right? So I'm trying not to be so brainwashed. And that makes me like better than 95% of people that really do seem to just mindlessly believe what they're told by the mainstream media. Most people took the COVID shots, which tells me that most people are stupider than me somehow, at least in the regard to their filters for what, their bullshit odometers and their filters for what's true and what's not. So there you go. But I'm 5% ahead in the race of getting to 100% to figure out what's actually the correct reaction and the right perspective to have on this stuff. Because once you get there, you get to a period of truth where you get to something that resembles truth, and you get a bit ahead of everyone else, and you go, right, everyone else is in denial, right? They think that, oh, this can't happen, Pizzagate's a bunch of nonsense, vote for Hillary Clinton, she'll make everything better. Like, that was the vibe back in 2016, and I went, none of this makes any sense, this stinks. And, I was right. I stand by that. That was the official position. Trump was Orange Hitler, and Clinton was going to save the world, and I just thought, this is absolute garbage. She's responsible for the deaths of so many people, like we know about. Just pay attention to the foreign policy. She was in charge of that shit. She was the one that, swooped in, killed Gaddafi, and plunged Libya into civil war. And, she's fine with it. She's absolute warmongering, bloodthirsty, evil piece of shit. So that's Clinton. I'm never going to be told the moral thing to do is to vote for someone like that. Trump had never done anything like that. He was a businessman and, ruthless or whatever. I don't give a shit. There's nothing. It doesn't even compare. Trump was obviously better in that regard. And most people are telling me I'm a degenerate and idiot and all that stuff. So I'm not buying any of that. No way. And I stand by it. I'm losing my train of thought. I'm sorry. So what happens is I'm outside of it, but I'm just one step outside is my general point, and I'm trying to come to something a lot better than just being not quite as stupid as everyone else. Like, I didn't fall for the first trick, but then you just fall for the backup trick, which sweeps everyone else up anyway. And I'm looking at it, and I'm trying to say, this is what I'm attempting to do with my reaction to this newfound emotion and incredulity I have about the depths of depravity and evil that exist and the scale to which they exist in the world. And I'm saying I'm not going to fall for another, like, I'm sure they're just sitting on the sidelines. Either they're just normal people who are power hungry, these politicians, and they can take opportunities like COVID and climate change and mass outrage about pedophilia. Either they're not necessarily participants in it, but they can leverage it and use it to get more powerful. That can be your perspective, or the perspective can be they are straight up pedophiles and evil Satanist, pieces of shit. Either way, they are going to leverage public outrage to gain more power, and it's going to work. So, as always, like, I can't believe it takes me this long to get to this stuff, because I've been thinking about this for about a week. And I'm just realizing, what's the game? What's the correct perspective? And it always comes back to the same thing, which is civil liberties. That's the only thing that matters. If you don't have civil liberties, you can't protect your kids, and you are the best person there is when it comes to protecting your kids. You are the one tasked with the responsibility of it. I don't care about any other possible mechanism you might have set up. The reason my kids are safe is because of me, because of the efforts I make. And there is no way government measures to prevent any of this stuff wouldn't do harm to the sovereignty of parents and the responsibility and authority they have over their own children. So it comes down to that. That was all that mattered with COVID, and it took me a few months to figure that out, because I spent a few months worried about the fucking virus, which was a complete distraction. There was nothing to be scared of. There never was. There was no pandemic. That's the truth of it, and I fell for it for a while. But in this case, there actually is something awful going on. I believe it. But the solution is totally unpalatable. I'm telling you that right now. We're at the early stages of this, and everyone's just watching from the sidelines. You don't need to believe that there's a cabal that are actually planning this, that formulated the creation of the movie, that did a fake op against it to try and suppress it or to make it look suppressed, and then harnessed the public outrage of it that was inevitable in order to leverage themselves into having even more power and to crack down more on civil liberties. You actually don't need to believe that it's all planned. You can just believe that they're watching it and going, all right. Just like George Floyd, right? George Floyd was great. Like, it got them elected. They didn't plan for that cop to, put his knee on some prick that overdosed on fentanyl, they didn't plan any of that. But the fact that it happened meant they could go insane and create a complete meltdown of every major city in America while the opposition was in office. Like, they can do that as an opportunistic thing, regardless of whether they plan it or not. And this is where I fall out with the super awake people in the world who are, just think everything's a plan. And I'm like, not everything's a plan. Like, COVID could have just been a natural thing, like a leak that they just leveraged, right? It doesn't have to have been planned, though, but that's a bit naive. We know that they had all these, we know that they had all these mechanisms in place and these notions for what they were going to do when there was a pandemic. So, and they did all that when COVID happened. But with this thing, I'm like, sometimes organic things just happen. And every single movement that I know of, every single opposition or resistance movement is either a psyop from the beginning or it's co-opted. So whether you're talking about the civil rights movement for people that aren't white, I guess, or black people, I don't know what the civil rights movement actually encapsulates. That movement is completely co-opted now. Black Lives Matter is the modern version of it. It's complete bullshit. It's a bunch of Marxists, self-admitted Marxists that want to destroy capitalism. It's got nothing to do with civil rights or the civil rights struggle or the equal treatment of people regardless of their skin color before the law, which is totally correct. It's got nothing to do with that. It's about killing the fucking white man and bringing about global Marxism, which is just it's not, they don't even pretend that it's about anything else. And it's just about enriching the founders of it, right? So it's a co-opted movement, right? It's a valid movement that now is absolute crap. So people will sit next to you and say, do you believe Black Lives Matter? And I'm like, yes. Well, then you're a no, I'm fucking not. Because I know what the movement is actually about. I'm not a Marxist. And you're trying to, they always do that. They always try and tie them together, right? You criticized Israel. Oh, so you must be a Nazi. Like, no, I'm not a Nazi. I'm actually Jewish myself. I don't believe that the actions of the Israeli, you know what I mean? I'm not even going to make that stupid example. But it's a co-opted movement. Feminism is a joke. It's a co-opted movement. Like, it's a valid movement that becomes completely, taken over by nut jobs. Environmentalism is a valid movement. I'm the biggest environmentalist in the world, and I have nothing in common with modern environmentalists. Liberalism, I still have liberal values, and I have nothing in common with the modern left at all. But yeah, environmentalism is, I care more than anything else about pollution, endocrine disruptors in everything, eating shitty food, corrupting all the genetics of the crops we eat, the meat eating awful shit, so I eat the awful meat, The plastics, the microplastics found in breast milk. There's just the heavy metals getting poured off into oceans. I care about this a hell of a lot. It kills me that it's happening. And what's the thing the environmentalist movement is primarily concerned with? Carbon dioxide. Seriously, carbon dioxide is the serious issue, is it? The planet's a tiny bit greener than it used to be, and we're getting hotter at the same rate that we were getting hotter pre-industrial revolution, because we're just in a natural warming cycle anyway that's probably going to end around 2150. It hasn't accelerated since we started burning fossil fuels. Human activity has nothing to do with the temperature of the planet. It's brought about unbelievable prosperity and wonders, and you're going to destroy all of it because you think that will save the planet from this imaginary problem. Like, I can't believe anyone is falling for that. But anyway, they are. That's the environmentalist movement, which has been completely co-opted. No one cares about anything worth caring about. The plastic straw, being replaced with the cardboard straw that falls apart and is packaged in a piece of plastic. The fact that I'm not allowed to use a plastic bag at the grocery store to put in my box of 60 garbage bags made of plastic that I just bought from the grocery store. Just all these little stupid head nods to something that is a really important and valid movement, and they're just saying no, look, you can't do anything that would actually be of any consequence. You just have to do all these little virtue signals. So imagine that with pedophilia. Imagine like all these little hoops you've got to jump through when it comes to your children and how you treat them, and all these things you're going to have to do to validate your own relationship with your kids in order to satisfy a bunch of reactionary measures that got pushed through because people are hysterical and emotional. And oh my goodness, can you imagine that? So yeah, I'm talking to myself from 5 days ago. That's what I'm really doing with this video, and I'm assuming that a lot of people are going to have the same reaction I did. I'm looking back at it and I'm saying, hey, mechanic from 5 days ago, your reaction right now, your pure hatred, your urge to go vigilante against all this stuff, your urge to make a hero out of that CIA guy, that is exactly what is going to ruin everything in the future if enough people feel the way you do, because they will vote for the most draconian shit ever, and they will, it's fear. It's fear is the mind killer. Like, that reaction is what begets the untenable solution from the state. Problem, reaction, solution. It's the most boring formula. It's just, it's not sexy. It's not something your mind instantly goes to. It's not something that you go, oh, that's what they're doing here, because it's not fun. It doesn't feel like you're doing anything compelling when you figure out that that's the same old process that they always use, and it's worked so well in the past. You get everyone talking about a thing, you get them all fired up, they start making demands, you meet those demands. They have nothing whatsoever to do with the problem in the first place. The problem may be real, it may be fake. The problem may be exacerbated by the very people who are being demanded to fix it. Half the time it is. If COVID is indeed a result of gain-of-function research, where did it come from? The fucking people that were in charge of all the public health measures to combat it, like Fauci. I mean, this is not even contentious at this point. This is well established. He funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan, which is where COVID is supposed to have come from. I don't believe that fully, because I also just kind of believe COVID basically it wasn't even a thing in the first place. Like, it was, I know that you only have one dominant respiratory virus per winter season, and the flu disappeared and COVID appeared, and a lot of people think that's a smoking gun, but that's actually kind of biologically valid that could happen. Like, if you did have what is a real alternative disease, you can have the flu disappearing as a result temporarily. Like, that is a thing. But I'm perfectly happy with people that say there was no such thing as COVID. The whole thing was made up. It was bollocks. I don't think you're that ridiculous if you believe that. I don't believe that, but a lot of people do. So when it comes to this thing, I'm saying the problem can be real or it can be imaginary. In this case, unlike like climate change and potentially COVID, the problem of child sexual exploitation is real. It's horrific, but it doesn't mean it won't be leveraged and used against you. So keep your wits about you. Mechanic from 5 days ago, keep your wits about you. That's what I'm trying to tell myself and anyone that works the way I do, which can't be that many people because I feel like I'm pretty weird. But that's the road I go down. That's my thought process. And it always surprises me how long it took me to come to this conclusion. Same with Ukraine, Russia, right? It's an emergent event. It's going to be leveraged by everyone to consolidate power because that's just how it works. And the best way they can do that is to have an emotional, fired up population that are making demands and are angry. They will do anything if you just lead them in the right direction, right? It's why vigilantism's bad in the first place, right? Like the whole time I'm watching it, I'm just wishing there was some bulletproof way to know who these fucking people were, who the child molesters were. I wish there was an undeniable way. I'm sitting there thinking to myself, what should the punishment be for these people? If there was someone caught undeniably, sexually abusing a child, what could we make the punishment? How bad could we make the punishment for these people? Assuming it was just undeniable, right? Because we don't want to catch anyone that might have been innocent, right? Because that would be a travesty. And I'm thinking, this is a fantasy. This is stupid. This is an evil fantasy I'm having in my own part because it doesn't fit with reality. You can't prove this stuff. You might be able to get someone on video. You might be able to catch someone with terabytes of child porn on their computer. You might catch them every now and again. But most of the time you won't have the proof you need to justify that kind of punitive treatment. And it's happened a lot. And a lot of this is anti-mob justice propaganda because they want you to believe that the only way justice can be fairly meted out is via the state, which, is bollocks. We know that's bollocks, but they're saying it's much worse with vigilantism and mob rule. And I'm saying maybe it is. I don't actually know the numbers on it. It's pretty ugly either way, right? Because mob rule it's just a smaller form of government. And to be honest, the smaller it is, the less legitimate it will appear, but also the more ability it has to remain accurate. I do believe that in tiny little communities where you have some mob justice kind of thing and you have some mafia kind of style setup, I do believe in circumstances like that, anyone getting caught molesting children is just going to get what they deserve, rather than in bigger, more legitimate societies with millions of people, with established governments and things like that. I believe those trend towards basically being very lenient and soft on these people because, logic and sense and reason take over and they say, look, we don't want to be treating people really punitively without full definitive proof. And in theory, it makes sense to err on the side of being, prudent and not being vindictive against people that might not have done the thing you thought. I do like hearing stories of that will come out of like Eastern European countries and Russia and places like that, where it's like father finds person that raped his 7-year-old daughter, beat them to death and faced no jail time whatsoever. I'm like, okay, I like hearing stories like that, right? But, I don't know what to do about it except stress the point I made earlier, which is you are responsible for looking after your kids. You're not responsible for looking after everyone else's kids because you wouldn't do a very good job. You can do the job you're good at, which is looking after your own kids. You're not going to fuck that one up. It's too important for you to fuck up, so you won't fuck it up. You'll do a good job. You'll keep them safe. Don't rely on anyone else to do it because that's the sort of thing that no one else will do properly with the same love, care, and attention to detail and passion that you will have. No one else, you can't delegate that. So don't delegate that to the state. So these kids that have fallen prey to this evil machine of human trafficking, it's a tragedy. In some cases, it will be due to neglectful parenting, which is obviously the most awful possible thing of guilt those parents must feel. If they were just negligent parents and one of their children got abducted, I can't imagine the guilt those people must feel because, they should have been doing a better job and they weren't. and other people that were just totally unlucky and, just had their children snatched and there was nothing they could do about it. And they did everything they could and they couldn't get it back, and they spend their life trying to get their child back. Like, it's just, it's so awful. But I just want to stress that any solution we might come up with to combat this that involves large organizations and the state, they're just going to become, we are going to create monsters like I cannot begin to describe. So don't resist and fight the urge and focus on the only thing that matters, which is civil liberties. Because if you don't have civil liberties, it's very easy to justify this. People say, number one, we've got to stop child molestation. We've got to stop this primary evil. It's the most evil thing in the world. It's priority number one. I'm saying, no, it actually isn't. Civil liberties are more important, because if you don't have civil liberties, then you can't protect your own kids. And if you can't protect your own kids, then they are going to fall into this continuing evil that is never going to be stopped by whatever apparatus they set up. You're just going to end up losing the ability to defend yourself and your children as a result of wanting to save all of the children. You're just going to end up losing your own. So that's the sad truth of it. That is the most pragmatic perspective I think I've ever had on anything on this channel. And one final point to close it out, which is that thing I touched on before, where I say every movement, every egalitarian movement ends up getting co-opted or was a psyop from the beginning in the first place. So we're talking civil rights movement, we're talking feminism, we're talking about environmentalism, now climate change, lunacy, all that shit. These are all co-opted movements. If you want to be an environmentalist, you basically have to go and say, down with the patriarchy and capitalism. Like, what the fuck? Like, I don't want there to be a bunch of plastic floating around in the oceans. Why do I have to be a communist now? Like, that's what we're dealing with, right? So the desire to protect children from predators is going to do exactly the same shit. So don't even align with it from the start. And yeah, the point I was actually trying to make with all that is Bitcoin is the only movement I know of that isn't and wasn't founded by the state or, a CIA op or controlled opposition or any of that stuff. Bitcoin is the only thing I know that remains legitimately a freedom movement that hasn't been co-opted and wasn't initially conceived of as controlled opposition in the first place. I say that truthfully from the bottom of my heart. They are trying, and, they have their arms around it to some extent, and there is some lamentable things about the state of Bitcoin, and you'll find me discussing them on this channel a fair amount. Nonetheless, the heartbeat of freedom is beaten once every 10 minutes in Bitcoin's blockchain. It's still there is nothing close to what Bitcoin can offer when it comes to liberation for humanity on a whole. It's incredible, and we've got a long way to go with the development of it too before it becomes realistic for everyone to use in a way that's sovereign, rather than just, gold 2.0 with a couple of bug fixes and it's okay, but it's not as good as it could have been. Like, we got a lot of work to do in Bitcoin. So get involved, be a part of the discussion, because I'm pretty sure without too much effort, I can create a narrative that says a world using Bitcoin the way Bitcoin should be and the way it's supposed to turn out is a world where a lot less child sexual exploitation occurs. I don't even know what the link would be there, but I'm pretty sure if I put my mind to it, I could explain how Bitcoin fixes this. Thanks for watching, everyone.